Howdy, haven't done a video showing my face in a while. Because, well, this isn't, YouTube face, and also, I don't really have any purpose to do so, and I don't really hear either. And so I'm just gonna have an unscripted conversation with myself about random conlanging ideas. Alright. So, where to start? Well, we could think about, I don't know, alternatives to first, second, third person system in a language for pronouns, some languages already, they just purely use only demonstratives, and we could build off of that. Some languages will just leave it up to context. Insert, usually it'd be like second, third person, or maybe third and first person share the same word, and because those two are fairly easy to discern based on context. So like, let's say the first/third person pronoun is ma, and the second person pronoun is like ko, and so like ma went to the store, which I don't know why I decided to make words when English already has words for these things, but anyway, ma in that context could be maybe I went to the store, but like if for whatever reason it's clear I'm not talking about me, so maybe I, whatever the context would be, like somebody I'm talking to had mentioned, I don't know, that John went somewhere, and they asked me where exactly it was, and I said Ma went to the store. Ma in that context would be clearly third person, not first person. Something like that. So that's one thing you do. You can just use demonstratives. Like maybe using this for first person, and then that for second and third. Sort of like contextually speaking, and then maybe if you have, in a similar way, sometimes in the third person, if we're distinguishing two different items, regardless of their distance, we might use this and that to discern between that. So like, for instance, I might say, like this marker versus that marker. That one's not that great, but this one's pretty good. Usually it would retain some type of distal element, and you'd usually only use, like in that context, you'd probably just use this for both. This one's pretty good, this one's not. But if you're like, I don't know, if you're going all the way over there, you go, oh, well, that backpack is boring, but like, oh, there's not a second backpack. Whatever, you understand what I'm trying to say. And you just extend that to the whole language pretty much, when it comes to discerning multiple things. And it's even more helpful if you have something like Japanese is kode, sode, and ade, where you have sort of three demonstratives. English sort of did with yonder, but yonder really isn't often used in general, and often isn't really used that way all too often. Even when it is used, it's sort of just used to rhyme with something else, and or used as a positional entirely and devoid of its demonstrative. Although I think yonder's always was the sort of distal equivalent of here, there, and over there. But I think it could also be used as a demonstrative, or there's some derivational form or something like that. But it's one thing. You could also sort of extend that. You could have separate demonstratives, and then you can have like person markers that take on all those inflectional forms and blah blah. That like pronouns tend to be fairly irregular, and have a lot of extra forms. And you could still have that, well, not basing it necessarily on first person. Like you could have like a vaguely near pronoun. That's just like refers to things on you, yourself, and things like in your hands. Then you could have one that refers to things around you, like the general concept of near you. Then you could have, and it would extend to people, so maybe, you'd usually use that one that like extends to you as like things that are just around you to refer to yourself in general, so like I. But if you're like shaking somebody's hand or something, or like you have your arm around somebody, and like you're talking to somebody else who isn't that person, and it'd be sort of like saying I, but referring to the person you're got your arm around, because you're not. It's not really first person. Something like that, and then far away, and then like you could like separate far as in far, but like in your general area, so like sight wise, so sort of what, and then far as in like quite far away, and or like out of the room you're in or whatever. So like sode and ade, except for it's like referring to specific people. Something like that. And then you could also, because really all that personhood is really doing is making it clear, trying to make it clear who in a context is doing what or did what. And naturally that tends to go with putting it in the perspective of those people. But you can do that without the first, second, third person thing. So like you could have like you could have it based on like anything technically. So based on who in the context seems younger or older, and if you're the one who seems younger, you use that personal marker, and if you're the person that seems older, you use that to refer to yourself, differentiating yourself from other contexts. The problem is when you're talking about people in the like that are in a third person, there would have to be a mutual knowledge, or you could just have a generalized third person marker that refers only, that is only used when you have no idea their age and relation. And you'd run into a similar problem a lot with any sort of non-person system to do that. And often a person system isn't enough, and that's why there's all sorts of other methods like that tend to get tacked onto those systems for differentiating different people in a context, like subject, object, reflexives, all help clarify who's doing what. A generalized pronoun like the general you, some demonstratives being used in combination with personal markers. Like there's all these different methods of doing it, and this would just be one way of doing it without having to use first, second, third person. And you could dream up infinite ways of doing so. For clarity, including like making pronouns only based on gender without the personhood system. Although that in the modern era would probably get pretty problematic. So I wouldn't recommend it unless you include plenty of neutral pronouns. And then you could have like, I'm forgetting the word. Basically, when you have two of the same pronoun in the same categories, except for one is only used when there's already one in that category in the context. I've used it in a lot of languages. I can't remember what it is. I think it's a type of anaphor, just like reflexives. But I can't remember the exact name. I know it's in Artifactzine's video on pronouns, either his first one or his second one. But, you could use that system with the gender and sort of get around the problem of having multiple people of the same gender in the same context. Sort of like, yeah. I really don't know why I can't think of the word. It's one of my favorite favorite things to do in like a artificial pronoun system. My nose is really itchy. Like the outside, it's this rim right here. I'm sure you've all felt that before, but it's not in or anything. It's right on the outside, right there. Anyway, not relevant to the video. What? Some other things you could do, not pronoun related, but like noun related in general, is you can like with Tokipona make very generalized nouns that refer to very generalized simplified things as sort of a root, and then maybe mix in certain pronouns to differentiate things in a context. I don't know. You could also just, if like you could imagine, this is unrelated, but still related to pronouns. It's unrelated to a different person system. You could imagine in like a world where species grew up, like co-lived with other intelligent species, and those two species shared a language, that they might develop different pronouns based on different species, whether or not there's person markers or not, but like, in general. You could imagine gender systems in that language potentially not, grammatical gender being based a bit on species instead of biological gender, instead of biological species. You could imagine all sorts of unique things there, especially if those two species have totally different sex breakdowns. Like maybe one, maybe you have a hermaphroditic species, a purely asexual species, and a gender binary, like, sex binary species all cohabitating. You could imagine, like, if there was a mix of gender and species, that it just become that a gender system could arise, a four-gender system could arise there. You could have, like, the two systems sort of collapse together in the word that referred to the hermaphroditic species in general, as the pronouns for the hermaphroditic species just become pronouns for hermaphrodites in general, and then the asexual, and by asexual I mean asexually reproductive, become like general pronouns for that. And you could imagine that that if it had like a neutral pronoun in this system, that it might retain a species distinction. And you could imagine that if the species distinction is lost in those specialty sexes, the four like sexes in this case, that human who is hermaphrodite might also, well, human, not human, but in the like human, it's just because humans have two biological sexes, generally speaking, not counting, if we base on chromosomes, not really, but you generally have two. But if you can imagine that the species in this context that has that would likely have the probability of intersex individuals, and they might use the same pronoun as the hermaphroditic species does. Even though in humans who be intersex are fairly underrepresented in pronouns because they come in such a small frequency that they either are forced by societal pressures into certain roles, or they can use the gender neutral, or they just decide which gender they want to go by. But there would already be built into this language a pronoun for those individuals. So that would be interesting. And then you could imagine what happens to the system if like a fourth reproductive system came in. After all of that has settled. Like, because of like, I don't know, maybe some hybrid species, or maybe a fourth species, if, it comes into contact. You could have, maybe they have a trinary sex system. Then you have to think about, well, what happens with the intersectionality of those three. You could have sex one be somewhere between sex 1 and sex 2, somewhere between sex 2 and sex 3, somewhere between sex 3 and sex 1, somewhere between all three of these. And would all those be given, because those would be equally as separate from each other in many ways, potentially, as the basic sexes are in general in that trinary, that it might be a little weird to map on the intersex pronoun to all of those. But then again, that could easily be what happens because of the shared characteristic that they are all intersectional. So there's a lot of things you can play with different reproductive systems. You could also have, maybe you have one species, alright, and they can, like with plants, they can asexually reproduce, well, like many plants, not all plants, they can asexually reproduce and, like, breed with each other. And you could see, like, this is not related to the pronouns, but you could see the nouns around the act of sex be just as diverse for asexual reproduction as there is in ours for sexual reproduction. We have tons of words for that, that refer to sex, and tons of innuendos, and you could see that happen with asexual reproduction too, potentially. Whereas we have like a few words that potentially do it, like, sometimes we call it cloning, and depending on different contexts with different animals, we call it certain different things. But generally speaking, we just call it asexual reproduction, or duplicating, um, or cloning. Those three. You could see more colloquial words, more slang and stuff develop around those, and even back with the multi-special language with those. You could see a lot of slang that you wouldn't see rise logically, well, very naturally in like a human language. So those are random things you could do. Additionally, um, you could have some reason why um, the trinary system could assimilate the all three of the others and sort of redefine where those are, and sort of all the maybe to their system and be redefined it's double what I had for the last 6 years before this year. So by proportion blow up, but like no. This channel ain't ever gonna blow up because I don't really post regularly and I don't post all that interesting content. To be honest, I just post random shit. So I'm done with this video. Bye.